It's 4:30 p.m. in Singapore and 10:30 a.m. in Berlin. Welcome to the Asian Banker Live. Today we're looking to rethink about core banking in a cloud world. This topic needs a little explanation. Looking at its most basic level, it's a system of records where customer information files are kept, accessed, and dated whenever a transaction takes place. Conventional setup is an enterprise-level type infrastructure comprising mainframe, think of AS400, and a closed architecture. It is often seen and described as very monolithic, hard-coded, custom-coded, edge processing, inflexible, cumbersome, and unwieldy. And best sum up in one word: legacy or archaic. Rightly or wrongly, these labels have stuck. The truth of the matter is core banking did and has evolved with the advent of service-oriented architecture, making it more open and easier to integrate and build on. However, the perception remained more or less the same. It's seen as monolithic setup, a physical setup where you keep the general ledger and customer information. Unwieldy, more of a bane to business and an enabler. If a bank cannot process a transaction or introduce a new product fast enough, core banking is always the excuse. Thanks to the World Wide Web explosion in the 2000s and the proliferation of web-based services and e-commerce, it changed the whole paradigm of network computing, the birth of cloud computing, a seminal moment in ICT evolution. Amazon Web Services, introduced in 2006, demonstrated that a cloud-based service can provide large computing capacity quicker and cheaper than a physical server farm. This spread the concept of software as a service, platform as a service, where an organization can literally build its entire IT infrastructure in the cloud. Brought e-commerce to another level, market and speed to scale. But the banks were left behind because the regulators were convinced that the cloud is neither safe nor secure. And recently, now we are at another seminal moment in bank technology. At the cusp of deep transformation, regulators themselves are pushing for more open API adoption, when also making clearer rules for cloud computing, and even introducing regulation to allow fintechs and digital-only challenger banks to operate and to reach scale. Which brings us all here today to think core banking in this world of clouds. Today we're happy to put together a panel to discuss some of these issues, the critical components that banks need in order to compete with nimble and lean newcomers. How can we transform existing legacy system into open cloud-based models? And what are the key success factors in enabling a fintech ecosystem within a bank? And we are very happy to have as part of our panel today, first off, Rana Peries, Director, Digital and Innovation at Barclays. Rana, business and technology leader and innovator with over 25 years of experience in financial services, covering corporate, retail banking, and wealth management, in developed as well as emerging markets. He has lived in and worked in Australia, Africa, Europe, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. So, his experience across different geographical areas. Next, we have Alfian Sharifuddin, Managing Director and Head of IT, or Head of Technology and Operations at DBS Bank. Recently joined DBS India. He has experience in implementing large group-wide programs and projects, and for defining technology and operation roadmaps and strategy at DBS. His experience in building high-performing teams of technologies and operational professionals who operate well in high-pressure situations, delivering the operational backbones of DBS. Prior to his role at DBS India, he headed the technology and operations and group consumer banking in Singapore. And next, I have Eugene Danilkis. He's the CEO of Mambu, a SaaS banking platform established in Germany in 2011. Eugene is this afternoon calling us from Berlin, where it's morning, 10:30 a.m. He has a passion for technology and design. He has a degree in human-computer interaction and computer sciences. And Eugene is the driving force behind Mambu Vision. He combines his background in technology and design with an entrepreneurial approach, using technology to find simple solutions to solve complex challenges. And finally, we have from our own research department, our senior research manager, Niti Agawa. Before I call on my first panelist, let me share some information on how you can participate in this live session. Okay, we want this to be interactive. We know many of you who have called in who have questions for our panelists. To ask a question, you can write your question into the chat box at the bottom right corner of the WebEx screen. So you must also have logged into the WebEx service, so you can do this on your computer. First off, I would like to ask Niti to start the session with a quick overview of the key developments in technology and to take us through this journey of how core banking has evolved and where the industry is at the moment. Niti?
Thank you, Woon Ping. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll take a few minutes to share a brief overview and how technology has been evolving over the last few years. So, during the course of our conversation with various banks, these were some of the common concerns we heard from CIOs. Now, underlying these, if you see, the first is the need for greater agility as new entrants such as fast-paced challenger banks, fintech and e-commerce companies that are able to bring faster products and services to the customers than a bank based on a traditional hard-coded and legacy infrastructure. These new banks offer an entirely mobile and digital banking experience, greater transparency, and reach customers in niche areas with unique services. So, for example, Movin was able to go to market instantly and capture market share of customers. Simple, within 1 year of its launch, was processing 1 billion transactions. Second, customer experience in other sectors is changing their expectations from their banks. Banks to rapidly digitize the services, provide real-time transaction, payment capabilities, and value-added differentiated services. Smartphone is now becoming a primary channel. Well, thirdly, banks have to transform rapidly in wake of new disruptive technology. Now, artificial intelligence, big data, wearables, biometrics, blockchain, robotics, they're all changing the face of banking. Banks to readily adapt to these and yet achieve all this while managing their IT cost efficiencies and threats of cybersecurity. So these all are kind of changing the technology priorities of bank. So if we look at our submissions for technology awards, which is kind of indicator of where the banks are focusing on, over the last 3 years, we see that core banking transformations that used to dominate technology initiatives has given way to digital services such as mobile banking and data analytics service initiatives as the top priorities. The bank looking to rapidly enhance digital capabilities to enable new methods of service delivery, customer experience, and interactions. But how equipped are the banks based on traditional or based on coded enterprise core bank systems? How equipped are these to achieve the required rapid transformation and maintain their competitiveness? Now, this is what a traditional core banking system looks like. The core banking, as we know, are extensive systems that comprise hundreds of applications, need to be integrated to multitudes of systems across the bank. It integrates with various legacy applications built over years in different operating systems and contains vast amount of static data starting from customer information file. It would typically take between 2 to 5 years to even upgrade these systems, or even more. So now suddenly we see new fintech companies that come to market and were able to sell solutions at the application layer. Then came to light a new approach to banking that took away this enterprise approach. we look at how technology architectures have evolved over the years, from mainframe and legacy systems, the transition started with banks moving towards open system in the 90s, opening up systems to new vendors. This followed by component-based modular and service-oriented architecture over the last few years. Now we see greater focus on services component, bring systems on cloud, enabling new efficiencies through software as a cloud or SaaS as it's known. These models standardize commodities, reduce time to market for development, and shift the cost base from fixed to variable. The efficiencies through clouds are well recorded, flexible infrastructure capability, compute power gets accelerated. The cost and time taken for implementation can be significantly reduced. So, given of the various efficiency benefits that we are seeing, moving to clouds is kind of almost a given. Of course, the biggest concern for banks is security and regulatory approvals. That's needed, especially in the case of public clouds. Let's financial that is able to bring a core banking on cloud, put it on cloud, and immediately get about 40 organizations in China to sign for financial cloud, including banks, payment providers, and even P2P platform. There are examples. UK Challenger Bank, Oak North, puts core banking on cloud. Atom Bank has built a core banking system on commoditized banking software. New players like Tandem, Monzo, Starlink, N26, they've announced that they are going to build a product with open architecture and API. Let's take an example. Fedor combines new banking license with its own technology and open APIs. So the web-based services architecture is growing in importance because it enables picking and choosing different products as opposed to building a single monolith. Open architectures to bank as a service and open API can enable bank to greater collaboration with partners, develop innovation, connect to an open ecosystem of multiple partners, and provide more customized service with speed. That said, the modernization journey is certainly not easy for banks, especially that are entrapped in current extensive legacy systems. So there are different approaches available, no one size fits all, but the question remains, what will be the best way to achieve this transformation effectively, efficiently, and with speed? So with this overview, I would like to hand it over back to Boonping. Boonping?
Thanks, Nidhi. Okay, now before I call on the next speaker, just one question for you. You got a chart on projects from the Innovation Awards program. Tell us where the industry is in terms of cloud adoption, if we can estimate that from the submissions on cloud-related projects.
So, cloud efficiency, cost efficiencies from cloud is really a big draw for banks. So we are seeing definitely in terms of non-core areas, the banks are progressively and steadily moving systems to clouds. In areas like HR, software development. So more non-core areas. Also, these are largely through private and hybrid clouds. So when it comes to core banking areas, we have all the greenfield projects that are embarked on private or hybrid cloud. Not too many instances of many big banks who are taking that plunge. Names that come to my mind are like Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Suncorp Bank. So these have been front runners. There are some new banks in India that are taking that approach. So data security and regulatory approvals, I think, still one of the biggest hurdles in cloud adoption.
Thanks, Nidhi. Okay, next I want to get DBS perspective on this. And Alfian has been with DBS for the last 10 years and has been involved in many of its major projects, including the core banking replacement it entered in the mid-2000s, and more recently with its digital business transformation. Alfian, tell us about the thinking that went into the DBS strategy on core banking, from banking replacement to digital transformation. Obviously, share challenges and major issues that you face. And now, almost 10 years later, how has the core technology infrastructure and architecture been transformed?
Or thank you, Ping, for this opportunity. Actually, so we've been on this journey for quite a while. So as you mentioned, from the mid 2000s right up to today, and the job is still not done. So it's obviously a lot to cover in 4 to 5 minutes. So I'll try to extract some of the key points and key critical points along our journey. So first off, like all banks, we had sort of monolithic setups in all our geographies. The core banking systems in our two largest geographies, Hong Kong and Singapore, were based on KICS, CCS systems, mainframe legacy systems. They were clunky, difficult to change, had a lot of integrated business logic, integrated deeply into multiple different systems, and in some cases lacked documentation. So we sort of adopted a strategy internally, which we call boulders to pebbles. So in essence, you've got a large boulder, and our main idea was to break the boulders down into smaller pebbles. And it was really inspired early on by a lot of the big fintechs, which adopted a microservices strategy that had APIs that they use to access these service layers. So sometime around 2008 or 2009, we actually introduced a service-oriented layer into the bank. That was sort of our first step in trying to address this whole core banking strategy. We really modernized it to follow current protocols in terms of using REST over HTTPS. We had a lot of debate between the various protocols available, and we eventually settled on REST. So by introducing a service-oriented layer, it allowed us a simpler way to sort of modernize our core banking system. So our approach was always to go from a legacy-based CICS KICS system into more of an open systems-based approach, and moving the business logic up from the core mainframe layer into the service-oriented layer, and even to an extent to the channel layer in some circumstances. So we adopted what was known as a hollow-out approach, because we have done several attempts at replacing core banking systems, and in some cases found it a little bit complicated, where we tried to do big bang approach. So instead, we fine-tuned our strategy and decided to tackle it module by module. And we had actually a lot more palatable and a lot lower risk for the bank. So once we actually did that, we found a way to quite easily change our core banking system. I mean, it's never an easy project, but it was at least, in a sense, doable. So once we put this foundation in place, basically a modernized core banking system and service-oriented architecture layer, which had an easy means of access via open APIs, we found that we were then able to iterate quickly on the channel layer. So we could run numerous experiments and adapt and adjust the channels, whether it be a mobile banking channel or internet channel or even staff servicing channel. We could iterate very quickly and run hundreds of experiments to figure out which flows work best. So the actually moved from adopting a very bank-centric view of how services would be provided to customers, to instead adopting a very customer-centric view of how we would provide services to customers. So instead of making our customers mold to however our services would be provided, we went the other way. We went from the bank actually molding around our customers' life, and we actually adopt a very strong cultural shift. So through the whole bank, we've made sure that everybody adopts a customer-first mindset. Our journey is not quite completed. We have just now defined sort of 5 pillars, which we are going to adopt and share right across the group to sort of complete digital transformation. So very briefly, these 5 pillars are organize for success. So in essence, we are looking at organizing our technology teams and our business teams to work closely together and in a different way from today. So today, very much business silo oriented. Tomorrow, we will actually include customer journey managers to cut across right entire different business segments to look at it from a customer journey perspective. We also shifting, the thing we're doing is moving from projects to platforms. So rather than looking at things as project, we're sort of launching platforms. Then we're going to automate everything. So the thing we're going to do is basically automate all our systems. Finally, as mentioned in the whole core banking thing, we're going to modernize our systems. And finally, the fifth pillar of our transformation is to develop high-performing agile teams. So we're going to organize such that the entire bank can operate as many agile teams, just like how the fintechs do it. And it's paying off. So last year in 2016, Euromoney actually awarded DBS the world's best digital bank, which has gotten our entire staff, excited, and our CEO went to collect the award on behalf of all of us. So that's sort of like our journey the last couple of years. It hasn't been easy. It's not completed, but it gives you a snapshot of what we're doing in DBS to sort of transform ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Alfian. And as we were discussing just before this session itself, you're also benchmarking your digital transformation, and you have an interesting program called Gandalf. Tell us a bit about that.
Yep, go on. Okay, so basically,
second part to that is what are some of the cloud-based core solutions that you are looking at in terms of actually introducing cloud-based solutions, cloud core solution in terms of moving from the existing legacy system. Yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting that you picked up on Gandalf. So Gandalf is the same as the wizard in Lord of the Rings. So in essence, to complete this kind of like cultural shift, everybody in the bank, whether it's a technologist or a business manager, adopts best practices of what fintechs out there are doing. We've sort of coined this internal program called Gandalf. So G stands for Google, A, Amazon, N, Netflix, D is for DBS, A is for Apple, L is for LinkedIn, and F is for Facebook. So in essence, what we've done is we've formed a core transformation team that's gone out all over the world and worked with all these fintechs, startups, and we've in essence adopted their best practices and brought it into DBS, and we've attempted to spread it out culturally through the whole bank. So for example, some things that we've adopted is like in Amazon's case, they've got the 2 pizza teams. So in essence, in Amazon's case, no team is larger than what it would take to have 2 pizzas feed the whole team. So in essence, 7-8 people per team. Because what they found in essence is if you run a team of 30, 40, 50 people, you tend to get lost in the communication and in the management of the sequencing and complex decision making and so on and so forth. So we've adopted the strategy and kept teams small. So that's an example of what we've done. So we've taken hundreds of best practices and gotten programs to roll this out right across the bank, from agile practices to DevOps practices to customer journey practices to even how teams are organized. So that's our Gandalf program, and it's an easy way to remember our journey and spread the message out. So onto cloud, right? Just like we've been sort of tested and a little bit nervous, but we are really pushing the envelope on cloud. So we have 2 prongs in terms of cloud. We've got an internal virtual private cloud, and we've got an external cloud agenda as well with the likes of Azure and AWS. So we've defined different types of systems that we would put on a VPC, the virtual private cloud, and different types of systems that we can put on an external cloud. So for external cloud, we would be more cautious about customer data, customer sensitive information. So we would go with encrypted information or even tokenized information strategies and techniques. For the virtual private cloud, we use that to do compute for our very heavily intensive customer data systems, such as our internet banking systems or our core banking systems. So using the tool, we actually have a combined cloud strategy that allows us to use the best of whatever the cloud offers today. We want to push more workload publicly, so we've stated that we do want to put about 57 to 60% of our workload publicly within the next 3 years. But we are still defining the exact strategies of what systems can go outside and what remains inside, because there's still a lot of questions in our mind even about customer sensitive data.
After in 3 years, where are you now?
So now I would say we're around 20-ish%. So still some ways to go. But really, I mean, we've even publicly announced we've gone with Office 365. So that was quite a big workload off. So, yep.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Next, Barclays has also gone through a similar journey and has perhaps gone slightly further. They open up their core infrastructure to fintech and prospective partners, introduce banking as a service. Rana, did you have to do that? Walk us through the journey and the thinking.
Thank you, Boon Ping. So I think Barclays, obviously, multi-geography like DBS, and our approach has varies a little bit from geography to geography. But our starting point has really been the realization that like most of the other banks, digital is a great opportunity to acquire and engage with customers in a very different way. And it's no secret, and there's a lot of data to support this, that banks haven't traditionally done this very well. Engage with customers in a meaningful way rather than a very transactional way. And I think in the DBS case, it talked about being customer first in everything we do. So a very similar approach. But when we look at that approach, what we realize is that the bank today, while we talk about digital a great deal, the amount of interact are happening through digital channels in the banks are quite limited to more servicing style transactions and not necessarily customer acquisition. So Barclays' approach has been to think of banking as a service platform. And the example that I'm talking about is very started off in Africa. A service platform, still leveraging very much our investments that we have made in our core banking platforms, because that they are really the heart of the bank in terms of providing the risk management, compliance, and the accounting, and the and taking those services that are provided by the core banking platforms and turning them into services or APIs, some built by us, some built by our partners, but bringing them all into what we call an open marketplace platform or banking as a service platform, and engaging with our fintech partners to build various propositions on top of it. So these fintech partners who work with us will consume or use the banking services and build something that is meaningful for a group of customers or a segment. Example, we have one of the partners who has built a small business, run your small business app that allows a small business owner to manage their staff, manage their workload, make the payments to them, and keep track of payment taxes. So, and then it has conveniences that are there for the small business owner and their employees. So that's just a very simple example of what the platform enables our partners to do, and through that the bank gets a greater or better engagement with those customers and also drives the customer acquisition. And that's a little bit different to engaging with somebody on open an account or perform a transaction type of service. It's been like a 20-month journey for us, and we've probably been in operation for now about 18 months in Africa. We have about 15 different partners at various stages. So So our real aim was to broaden the distribution of banking products and services in different ways that enable different business models, and work with partners to do that. And really, when we talk about that, it's probably worth considering some of the data supporting this thinking. And that before, the digital channel usage is very much limited to transactions and not acquisition, and this is not specific to us or any particular geography. You see that across the globe if you look at the data. The second data point is that and not just for banks, for any organization, people say, executives say that the return on investment on innovation investment is quite hard to realize because of the challenges of innovation. And organization culture, agility, risk, coming up with the right products, having the insight of the market. So one of the great things about the platform is, if I think of how long would it take for the bank to innovate and create a new product, whatever time frame is, we can multiply it 20-fold by working with 20 different partners, each one innovating on the platform, and it could be much greater than that. So not all of them are successful, but there's number greater than one that is successful. So which is great news for the bank, because we create a platform and our partners use that platform to innovate number of products that bring business and customer engagement.
Right. And taking this approach for a market like Africa, because that's a relatively kind of a new separate from the rest of the maybe more core markets, where you can where you benefit best from the ability to innovate, introduce new product services. You can kind of leverage off the kind of speed to deploy and the lower cost of the platform. How that kind of will be migrated or adopted to the wider Barclays strategy?
I think so. Different markets have different dynamics, and also sometimes the appetite. So it was for us like a nice experiment, and we started off that way with some initial trials, talking to partners. But we are also seeing not just Barclays, other banks adopting this approach across different markets. And specifically in Europe and UK, it's also driven by what the regulators are asking the banks to do, with initiatives like PSD2, CMA remedies, and so on and so forth, asking the banks to normalize, understand services that provide to the market, and that opens up a number of opportunities for partners to work with banks. So I would say that this approach that we have adopted right out in Africa is very likely to get used, replicated in other markets, both in Africa and other markets that Barclays operates in. But more importantly, it's not just a Barclays thing. It's a universal trend that I am kind of seeing, because many of the banks have announced banking as a service or API initiatives, and they are all working with partners to do this. And the drivers may be slightly different in each market, but I think the end outcome is a greater benefit for the customers and greater benefit to the banks, as obviously, as well as intermediary partners and fintechs. They've traditionally struggled with engaging with banks and doing things, and I think this type of platform thinking is making that engagement a little bit easier and smoother.
Okay. Talk specifically about the move towards cloud-based solutions as well. With Alfian currently 20% of the kind of technology workload is in the cloud. What would be kind of similar matrix for Barclays?
We really work on, it's early days, right? So I think the single KPI, if I were to refer to it, would go when this is mature, how much we can shift customer acquisition to digital channels, right? But today a good metrics to have is how many partners are we helping to commercialize? Because each partner represents access to a pool of customers, and we are kind of in the early days of that journey, and the trend that we see is quite positive. It's an upward trend. Talking to other colleagues in the market and looking at some data, it suggests that while banks have really stepped up on the innovation capabilities of banks, that turning those innovations into commercialization is still not very effective for banks, and we are seeing with this platform a trend of being able to commercialize more initiatives that are coming through. So that's a positive trend for us, and we want to keep growing that.
Okay, thanks, Rana. Okay, so the sector continues to face this competitive scenario with the growth of fintechs, and as we hear from Rana, with increasing collaboration with partners, and as well as emerging the events of new India banks. Now to bring Eugene into the discussion. In this scenario, what are the biggest challenges that incumbent banks and financial institutions face? What are the success factors in managing this? And could you also tell us a bit about Mambu? See this as an alternative to core banking. What does it provide? What has it to offer to banks in transition towards kind of more cloud-based solutions?
So let me just maybe start off on the first point, just talking about what's actually going to change, because that would probably then make it more clear as to why Mambu exists and what it does and why it makes it different. I think the challenges they're facing is the same things that are creating the opportunities for fintech companies to come along. So you have rapidly changing customer expectations. You have new technology capabilities which are available to both customers as well as the financial institutions. And of course, recently you're also seeing now increased competition. So this kind of creating this imperative to be able to quickly evolve, which you haven't really seen, I think, in banking or finance in general, really, in the last 5-10 years. Before you could build something out, and you knew that the rate change of technology expectations, that you could build something that would last pretty much the same way for the next 5-10 years, because things wouldn't change so much. Right now, the way that technology is changing so quickly, no one knows what's going to be available in the market or what the expectations are or what the competition is going to be. So the mindset, I think, is what's sort of changed from the financial institution side, is that they're looking to be able to build something that's allowing them to be able to thrive in an ever-changing environment. And that's really them creating processes and a culture that is more lean, that is a bit more agile, and has a more adaptable operating model. And underpinning that, of course, is looking at technology with some of the same sort of similar attributes, right? And there, I think the cloud part of it comes in. I mean, the cloud, from my side of it, refers to a couple different aspects. There's cloud from the pure infrastructure side of it, in the sense that you have scalable servers and scalable technology, hopefully at lower cost than you would have with your own data center. So that gives you, again, that lead actual operating model, because you could scale up to hundreds of servers, you could scale up between different spaces, whatever you need to be able to scale that up and down, and at lower cost to manage the whole entire thing. So that's one part of cloud as we refer to it, but I think that's really just one piece of it. I think cloud is also referring to a brand new breed of applications which are built out in a different way than previous enterprise technology, where, again, you would, by system, as you described at the very beginning of the conversation, you would customize it, you would maintain it, you would set up mainframes. So cloud is also referring to a different breed of applications, of which Mambu is a part of, and that's software as a service wave. It's really referring to an application that's configurable, that's productized in the sense that across all of our, 180 live operations in 40 countries, everyone's running the same version of the application, which means we're taking innovation that's coming from a business center in China to a lending company in Australia to a bank in Germany. And the innovation that's coming from that is coming into our one product and platform, and we're constantly evolving on that. So the application side of it, and having an application that is API driven from the beginning, API open basically, such that you could integrate it. It's an open architecture. You don't go in and customize the code, but you configure it like you do Salesforce, and then you integrate to your ecosystem, is a new breed of applications. And that is enabling for much more lean and agile change, just as we heard from Alfian and Rana sooner. That's allowing organizations to quickly innovate around the channels, around things like credit scoring models, around the different products and services, while we as a software service provider or other SaaS solutions take care of everything else basically behind the scenes. So functionally, Mambu provides similar functionality to kind of what you described effectively. It's keep track of all the customer accounts, the transactions, the accounting data, the system of record effectively, the architecture and the way that we deploy and the way that we provide the services is completely different, I think, than traditional core banking systems. And allowing organizations to create these lean and agile and really adaptable operating models by using us as their engine, and then focusing, just as we talked about, around products, around channels, and being that them to be what's differentiating themselves in the market then.
I asked in terms of where the bank is today in adopting cloud, including applications like what you provide at Mambu. Where would you say banks are in terms of readiness, and what do you see as some of the challenges, and what to you are some of the needed opportunities, and where are you seeing them?
I think the immediate opportunities we're seeing with traditional banks is on two fronts. One is what we kind of refer to their speedboat initiative. So a lot of larger banks, larger financial institutions see their existing business as a cruise ship that's kind of moving along and it's moving at its own pace, and many forward-thinking ones like Barclays and DBS are trying to transform business. But at the same time, they see an opportunity of instead of ongoing a 2-5 year transformation process to how to actually explore cloud and build out new business and operating models much quicker and in a more lean way. And so we're quite a bit of institutions who are now launching either banking products or lending products, or even looking at the P2P space and trying to do that sort of innovation themselves, and looking at what kind of technology stack do they build out from scratch, what kind of operating model, what other complementary services do they build into that ecosystem, and using that to both bring a new product and a new brand to market that is more fintech oriented from its attributes, but using that also then as a chance to learn, bring innovation back into the core business, which would then, as strategy, drive a transformation across most likely business units, looking for which business unit would have the biggest benefit of doing transformation. Some of the cost related, maybe you're spending crazy amounts on costs of customers which are relatively low value, but because they're running on mainframe systems, you're paying huge amounts. So maybe that's a business driver to move those to a different product, a different architecture using cloud technology, or maybe it's because you realize that a product you had in the market is not being able to innovate or as the competition, and so you move that business unit out and you create a new operating model for that business unit.
Okay. One of the things that we discussed or we preface this discussion with is that the banks has been slow to adopt cloud because regulators are unconvinced. Is that a convenient excuse? How ready are banks themselves to transform, to change the way that they are doing things from even not just legacy system and technology, but their legacy processes? in the different projects that you're working on, are there inertia within banks themselves to move towards cloud-based applications?
Absolutely, but I would say it's also really very quite recent. I would say probably in the last 18 months or so. As you probably know, as you mentioned at the beginning, Oak North Bank is one of the first banks in all of the UK that's running in the cloud, and also their process and the way that they leverage our technology, the conversations they have with the regulators, is actually also what enabled the regulators to go through the deep understanding of the benefits of cloud technology. So I think there's a little bit of it's something that keeps being repeated in the market, that the regulators are not comfortable with cloud. I think the actual reality of it, because we've engaged quite heavily with regulators, both ourselves and also with Amazon Web Services together, with the regulators in the UK, in Germany, in Netherlands now, in South Africa, and the other markets. And the reality is actually when you start to engage with them, they're actually very forward thinking. They never really had a practical conversation with either a software provider like ourselves or with an infrastructure provider like AWS around what are their actual concerns, which is part of what they're supposed to be doing as regulators, and then how does our technology and how does the AWS infrastructure actually address those concerns. So it's really a process of actually just simply talking through their practical and reasonable concerns. And what they quickly discover once we actually go through that process is the fact that all of those are addressed just as well, if not much better, than pretty much most banks, except maybe the top one or two banks in the country could ever do themselves within their own organization. Technology, of course, like something Amazon has invested, the amounts of money they put into their data centers, the features of security, the encryption levels, that exceeds by far what most any bank could ever do themselves. So it's really that process of actually engaging with them, listening to their concerns. But when you actually do so in the market, and banks we've been talking to haven't very eager to have that conversation, you'll find that they're actually very open to it as long as you're actually listening to the concerns and practically addressing them with solutions.
Okay, thanks, Eugene. I'd like to bring Alfian back into this discussion. Alfian was talking about from 20% to eventually about 50-60% of current workload onto the cloud. Now, looking at the cloud as provide two different type of solution or services on the infrastructure solutions and application solutions. What are your thinking in terms of where the opportunity to increase usage adoption of cloud is, Alfian?
Right. Okay. So we've actually tried to bucket different applications and put them into different categories. So then we decide which type of cloud adoption or compute adoption we take. So the most obvious one for us is testing. So in areas of testing, right, where data can be easily masked or jumbled up, that definitely we want to totally go onto the cloud. The other piece is in storage, because in storage you can actually encrypt or tokenize a lot of your information. So you can actually have a lot of it out there, and it's effectively pretty safe and pretty okay from our point of view. The piece is in burst compute capacity. So if we manage to tokenize data and move out for compute capacity, that's the another piece of low hanging fruit that we can get. Fourth piece we've decided also to move out is things that are sort of brochureware, non-sensitive information. The easiest one for us in that regard was our public internet, our public websites. So in essence, things like brochureware, things where we show a lot of product information that's sort of that we move out. The fifth piece that we've recently pushed envelope and gotten out is the whole Office 365 adoption, right? We've actually moved our entire correct. We're still a little bit nervous about is obviously the area of customer data. So core banking, that one is probably a while away before we move it out. But I think in the first four items that I mentioned, is already enough to get quite a lot of our compute moved out.
Okay. What like a product solution, a lending system, or SME loan system?
Right. One area we're looking at right now is in essence algorithmic lending. So there are a lot of companies out there that use non-bank specific data to figure out whether a customer is creditworthy or not. And they combine that data with our data and actually provide a credit score. And they're essentially cloud-based companies. So those are people that we're looking to partner with. So it's not to say that we are moving our systems out, but it's more like in the way Barclays is doing it. We partner up with the fintechs,
Yeah.
and through the services that the fintechs can provide through their wide array of data and through some internal customer data, we combine the two aggregate pieces of information and provide a credit score, and then we then do our own internal decisioning as to how much and how risky we want to go in terms of lending to these types of customers.
Okay. Now, you are not based out of India. Of course, your business in India is very different. Different infrastructure, different costs. You have different distribution as well. Does it lend itself better for what you're doing in India? You're more likely to adopt a different operating model, maybe more cloud-based, maybe more fintech. This is one example. Yeah.
Correct. So I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So the obvious biggest difference between say a geography like Singapore or Hong Kong and India, just the sheer number of customers, potential customers and people that exist. We're talking about 1.3 billion people in India versus say 6 million in Singapore. So obviously, when you're talking about 1.3 billion and you this urgent need to scale, like in our digibank business, that's when cloud compute really becomes very, very useful. Because in the old days you would invest in huge infrastructure and sort of if you build it they will come adopt that approach. With cloud-based infrastructure, you actually scale up according to your customer sign up and your customer demand, so you avoid that hefty need for infrastructure investment. We've actually put a lot of our compute on cloud when it comes to this scale capability. So we use companies other than say Amazon. We use companies like Akamai, for example, which is in a sense another cloud-based infrastructure that allows us to soak up the huge usage demands without having to do that big investment up front. So I see quite a lot of potential, especially in a geography like China, like India, where you're talking about 1 billion people potential.
Yeah, the need to kind of scale quickly and okay.
Precisely.
Rana, the same question to you as well. Operating, although today you are in Singapore, what opportunities there in terms of the opportunity to look to ring and to look at different operating model from maybe the main bank itself?
So, if I look at the platform operating model that we started off in Africa, we see opportunity to kind of replicate that platform in different markets, right? So that's from a pure platform business model perspective, and that's kind of consistent with what everybody else is thinking of as well. In terms of we host it and cloud adoption and so on and so forth is concerned. The cloud for us gives great level of agility than having it all sitting inside the organization, especially when you consider the ability to replicate this thing across different markets. But what we're seeing is that the regulators in different markets obviously have slightly different views. Some are a little bit more forward looking, and some of them are facilitating this kind of innovation, as you see with the case of MAS in Singapore. So we will, I think our strategy at the moment is we will adopt whatever the market enables us to do as we deploy to different markets and work with regulators in each market to get to the next level of being able to leverage cloud and infrastructure as a service.
Obviously, even as a regulator for now has got concerns, I think the overall trend is even as we observe at the Asian banker, is that there are enormous benefits of putting either application or infrastructure in the cloud in terms of the ability to scale, the ability to bring innovation, collaboration, and bring down for the technologies, the overall cost of ownership of their technology. Today from our panelists, we get to hear some of the projects that they are working on. What we can agree is that everyone is still pretty much experimenting, and a lot of these projects are kind of taken with the aim of transforming the business, being more customer-centric. I think the days of just merely replacing what is there in the past no longer applies. It's about looking at a different IT model, partnership model as well, as technology evolve, as the marketplace evolve as well. We want to thank all our speakers today, but also we want to let everyone know that this topic on cloud will continue. The Asian Banker is organizing our Future of Finance Summit on the 8th to the 10th of June in Singapore. This is our rebranded summit, and this topic will be in many of the sessions. Now, prior to this session, we also ran a contest to encourage callers to this session. So we want to congratulate Ms. Lim from UOB, who is the 30th person to register for this session, and she means for herself access pass to the Future Finance Summit to the event. And to our panelists, we want to thank you all for your insights, for your participation. To Alfian, Rana, Eugene, and Niti, thank you for insights and analysis. And also for all our audience for calling in. We hope they found today's session insightful and useful. If you missed any part of the session, a recording of this will be made available on the Asian Banker website. So visit the website and if you listen to a playback of it. So at the next event, we wish you all a good day.